a lot of times in the injury report, we are hearing about things and we're learning about the extent of the injury, how long. Today we want to kind of go a little deeper and get some information on these injuries, of course, with Dr. Kevin McHale, who excellent job as always on our injury report here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. And today's injury report with Dr. Kevin McHale, it is brought to you by Cape Regional Health and Penn Orthopedics. The best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics. Now, Doc, for the people out there who have listened to the segment or maybe are just tuning in for the first time and hearing you, you currently Cape Regional and Penn Orthopedics, but your prior life, you worked with the New England Patriots and two of the other sports franchises in Boston. Was it the Bruins and the Celtics or the Red Sox, one of those two?
Yeah, exactly. The Bruins and the Red Sox and the Patriots, that's right.
So
got a lot of rings.
Yes, he's got a lot of rings up there. So I guess let's start with being a team doctor. How difficult is it and the pressure of trying to get these guys on the field? Like, obviously, there's a lot going on in Philly with the medical team is getting a lot of heat right now. Some people are blaming them. Some people are blaming Desean. What kind of goes into this type of decision where it seems it's very murky here?
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated at the NFL level, and it's for a lot of reasons. If this is your typical recreational athlete to take 6 weeks off and try to rehab something and then decide it's not working to have a surgery would not be a big deal at all. That's a very, very common scenario. But at this level, every week matters, and there's just such a ton on the line for each of these weeks, whether it's the players getting a productivity bonus, whether it's, the team making the playoffs. There's just so much at stake. So there's a lot of pressure, and it's from a lot of different angles. You could have some pressure from the coaches, some pressures from the player themselves, because they all want to be on the field. You have pressures from agents. You have pressures from just the teammates. There's just pressure from everywhere. But as a team physician, what it really comes down to is just trying to make, just the best decision for your patient. Giving them the idea of these are the options that we have available to us to treat you. This is the likely scenarios with each of these options. And the most important thing at that level and at any level is what we call shared decision-making, having a discussion with the player and all the other people at stake, say, all right, these are our options, and we kind of make a decision together as a team. It's not a unilateral decision made by the team doctor saying, this is what we're doing and this is how we're moving forward.
So in a situation like this, week 2 happens. It sounds as if the Eagle team doctors recommended or somebody recommended surgery. Desean says, I'm not interested in that. The player has every right to basically say, I don't want to go through this. And then they give him some plan B and C options, I would imagine?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things about that. Number one, obviously if it's unsafe for an athlete to play, then you can be a little bit stronger with recommendation, right? With sports hernias, these type of abdominal strains where you have injuries in the muscles in the groin area, it's safe to play through it. We see it all the time. And players that have persistent symptoms and it hurts them will get off-season surgery. We have a couple of examples that we have experience with. Donovan McNabb, we remember that season. He played through it for several weeks, never looked himself, and finally had that season-ending surgery. And then there's other scenarios on a much more positive spectrum, like Adrian Peterson. When he came back from that ACL tear and had that ridiculous season, almost broke the single-season rushing average, he had an abdominal strain mid-season, played through the whole rest of the season, continued to break 100 yards every game, and then had all-season surgery. So it can go either way. So when you have a discussion with the player, say, yeah, your strain might be pretty significant and you benefit from surgery. When it's not unreasonable to try to play through it, you can kind of support that athlete and just try to get them to be at their highest level that they can play, and then knowing that if it doesn't work out, we still have surgery as a backup.
Dr. Kevin McHale was a assistant team doctor with the New England Patriots. Of course, we hear him weekly here with our injury report with Cape Regional and Penn Orthopedics. So Desean Jackson suffered a tear of the ab muscle, needed surgery, got that surgery. He suffered a torn ab muscle against the Bears, and it was reported that he had that torn completely off the bone there. He declined surgery after grade 2 surgery injury back in week 2. So when you heard that off the bone, does that sound like a re-injury, a different injury from what he had? What is your conclusion now? Is it clear of what actually happened and what has been the problem with Desean Jackson?
Sure. So based on the information that we have available to us, right, when the week 2 injury happened, within the subsequent weeks, we found out that he had a grade 2 abdominal strain. If that isn't in fact the case, obviously I didn't look at the MRI, but with a grade 2 strain, it's a partial tear. So obviously worse than a grade 1 strain, which is no real structural damage to the area that's just kind of stretched and injured, but not completely torn. A grade 2 is a partial tear. So what could have happened in Desean's case is that he had this grade 2 injury, tried to give it as much time as he could to heal, got back out on the field, and then that partial tear was completed into a complete tear. And that's what a grade 3 injury is that complete tear. So it may have been that had he had that grade 3 tear all along, and maybe that would have been the information they needed to push him into surgery earlier on in the season. But even, sometimes they can play through these more severe injuries. That being said, it's very possible that he had a grade 2 injury, a partial tear, that tried to get it to heal, and then as soon as he went out there to play, it just got even worse.
So there is like different, it seems, reports, or I want to say prognostications about if Desean can come back either during the regular season or even in the playoffs. You've seemingly talked about how it's kind of nebulous. It all depends on the healing and the recovery. But I know we've talked about this in the past, Doc, about how this particular surgery, sometimes your body makes you feel like you're ready to go, and then you re-aggravate it. So just in your own advice, when you've done these or recommended these, have you just said, hey, look, you got to take X amount of weeks, or do you encourage a player to get back on when he's feeling right? Or what kind of advice usually comes post-op here?
Well, so a couple of things. With the injury in and of itself, a lot of times it's a gradual process, and the players may not be at 100% when they get back out on the field, but you want them to be at a point where they're at a high enough level where they have enough strength, enough speed back, and where they can compete at a good level, but also that they're not going to be at risk for another injury or something like that. When you have a post-operative patient, the same things apply. You want to make sure that they have good range of motion, good function, good strength, and that they're relatively pain-free. It's okay if there's some soreness here and there, but nothing real significant. With these types of injuries, the timeline they threw out many times has been 6 weeks, but 6 weeks is kind of the optimal timeline. You're hoping they're back and ready to go at 6 weeks. It could take a little longer. Beat the timeline too. There's exceptions on either side. Mm-hmm. But, we heard the story of Mac Hollins where he was out for a very long time because he got sidetracked with a re-injury, and things aren't always, what you hope they're going to be. But most of the time, you just have to work with the team, the player, and work with the trainers and work with the entire staff to make sure that not only does the surgery go well, but that his post-operative rehab and recovery puts him at the best place that he can be, that he gets on the field as quick as possible, and also at the greatest level of strength and to be able to perform at the level we want.
How much conditioning can a guy do? So if Desean theoretically has a great recovery and he's 6 weeks out, he's ready to go, how conditioned is he able to keep himself while he's kind of recovering from this surgery?
So that's actually a really good question. So in general, there's a lot of ways you can get them to continue to condition, and it's a very active rehab. Obviously, there's some period of downtime with some resting and icing and kind of taking some anti-inflammatories, just kind of recovering from the surgery itself. But as soon as they can, they get them mobile and get them moving. And it may start out as doing some low-impact stuff, whether it's just getting on the exercise bike, doing stuff in a pool, whatever they can to get them, without a lot of load or impact, but getting them building up that strength to get them back to normal level. And then once they can get them running, they get them out on the field. Obviously, you can have someone doing a very gradual progression in their recovery, so that way they get stronger and stronger by the day, and you try to minimize risk along the process. You're not going to have them the first time they go for a run, he's going to be in pads. It's a very gradual process, but it starts early on. From day one, you want that recovery starting.
All right, the other guy is Ben Simmons, who I don't know if you saw the video and can come to any sort of hypothesis or conclusion off of that because it seemed a little murky, but it sounds like a minor AC sprained joint in the shoulder. We've talked about this a lot in the football realm, but what about on the basketball side, how that injury might differ and what it could mean for him in a timeline we're looking at?
Sure. So with Ben Simmons, at least the video I saw, he kind of ran into an opposing player, and that's how he ended up injuring that AC joint. And it's a typical way to injure it in that you have a collision to the outside of the shoulder that pushes down the acromion, that bony prominence on the outside of your shoulder, away from the collarbone, your clavicle. So that's the AC joint, is that joint between those two bones. Now, typically we see it in football players, right? They get tackled, they land on their shoulder, some other big, defensive lineman's on top of them, and it crushes that in there. And we call that a separated because the bones separate. Now, the good news from Ben Simmons is it sounds like his x-rays were negative, so we would assume that there was no real significant separation. On that, we call an AC joint sprain, just an injury there where the ligaments are strained from that collision, but they weren't completely torn where the bones actually separate away from each other. So for what we call a grade 1 injury or a mild sprain, typically the recovery time's pretty quick. I wouldn't expect him to be out a long time. Now, the thing is with a basketball player, all that overhead activity, any overhead athlete, the AC joint injuries tend to be a lot more symptomatic and bother them a little longer. We see it in football players and wide receivers and quarterbacks that might take a little longer to recover than, say, a lineman. But that being said, with how mild it looked for Simmons, at least based on the video, I wouldn't expect him to be out very long. Hopefully we're only seeing him missing, a few games or maybe a week or two.
All right, so it doesn't sound bad there. Now, would you anticipate, real quick back on Jackson, they said 4 to 6 weeks originally, but they put him on injured reserve, which means he cannot play unless the Eagles not only make the playoffs, but make it to the divisional round. He would not be. He has to sit out 8 weeks. Does that sound like a timeline that he would be healthy, ready, able to run, and be back participating?
I think in general, anything less than 6 weeks would be very, very optimistic. I think 6 weeks is a good goal, but knowing that it may take longer. So by putting him on IR and having him sit out the whole 8 weeks, I don't think that's unreasonable at all. It's actually much more likely that he'll be ready to go at 8 weeks than he would at 6 anyway. And this may give the Eagles a little room on the roster to make whatever roster moves they need to try to fill that void. Because otherwise, I think it's unlikely to see him on the field before that 6 week timeline, kind of no matter what, whether it was on IR or not. So hopefully the Eagles can continue this win streak and put them in a position that we'll be able to use Desean Jackson later on in the season. But I think it's not a bad idea based on what we know at least.
All right, good stuff from Dr. Kevin McHale, as always, here with our injury report this week. It's brought to you by Cape Regional Health System Penn Orthopedics, the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics. Thanks, Doc.
All right, no problem. Hopefully these Eagles guys will heal up on the bye week.